person and online. Thank you so much. Also, while Daniel was praising all the technology achievements I've made, I was trying to figure out how to get that slide on the projector. So we start with failures, but it's been a great day. I had a scripted start for my presentation, but I think I'm going to pivot because I've learned so much since morning. And I want to give a shout out to lay this ground for my presentation to a friend who spoke a lot about feedback and tangible work with children, intergenerational learning spaces that Alan touched on because that's what we're going to talk about right now, children. And Michelle's work as well in talking about tangibility in things. So thank you for doing that work for this last presentation. So I'm going to continue the conversation started very conveniently using all the theories and premise that he's laid ground for, so I don't have to do that boring stuff. But I'm going to focus on lessons learned from facilitating learning of human-centered design. But in case you so expect madness, chaos, and we do all these beautiful things where we are looking at with, about, and through with HCD. We do everything at once, nothing is planned, everything is all over the place. And then we sit together and be like, oh, this is the mess, and now we're going to see what we learned, what they learned, what all of us learned together. So that's going to be the theme of this presentation. I want to prepare you for that, some chaos. And before I go deep into the work, I want to just say a little bit about who I am as a researcher. Learning design and technology, teaching and learning here at Elon University. That's where I am. So I'm deeply rooted in technology. I love everything about technology, touching, exploring technology, what it can do for you, how it impacts our teaching and learning environments. A lot of times we are like, technology brings people from miles and continents away from each other closer, and this is what it does. But oftentimes it takes people who are in the room away from each other. So we have work by Sherry Turkle that talks about alone together. What is it doing to our collaborative processes? What is technology doing to our collaborative processes? And then I'm a big fan of design thinking, designery ways of thinking, human-centered design, because we use that context to explore all these concepts. So all the work is grounded in a learning environment where we are teaching with, about, and through human-centered design thinking. And I'm trying to focus on this role that technology plays in the process. So that's basically the context that I'm in. Most of our principles align. Sadhana and I have worked together in so many different contexts. So most of our principles align, but this will give you a place to kind of ground my work. So yeah, technology in teaching and learning. There is so much research out there that is going to tell you that bringing technology and tools into your learning environment, your engagement is going to start looking different. Mostly good attendance, independent learning, a lot of self-learning can happen in your classrooms. And then there are also some that we like to call, the tech pessimists, who are going to tell you that nope, there's no change in performance over here, no change in your dropout rates, your teaching practices, and all those things. So there are researchers, like there's evidence on both the sides of the spectrum over here. So my question is, what are we missing? What are we missing? We are missing the gray on the two sides of the spectrum, and we are missing that essentially because we are trying to understand this is a technology that I'm bringing into my learning environment. What aspect of teaching and learning is this affecting? What is it doing to my academic performance? What is it doing to engagement? But we are not thinking about the learning as a whole ecology, the learning as a system, where if you bring a technology, or it never comes as a technology, by the way, multiple technologies, systems of technologies into your system of learning, it's going to bring something and it's going to take away something. What is it bringing? What is it taking away? So researchers that focus on that systemic level of understanding teaching and learning and what technology is doing in the learning space is what we are missing, or there's fewer of those researchers. And that's the place where I was trying to explore my own research interest. This is from my work that I did with my advisor back in during my thesis, and I'm still as fascinated by these concepts as I was back then. So for this particular study, I'm going to focus on looking at the learning environment as a whole and modeling how we all can do as instructors, designers, look at the learning environment as a whole as an instructor and a researcher. So moving on to that, these are some of the research questions that I'm going to dive deeper into. And as you look at the research question, you may think that these look more narrowed down, but the way we were conducting the research and the methodology will speak a little bit more to the idea of that holistic teaching and learning environment. So we're going to look at how do different technologies impact children's collaborative design processes in the early stages of design. The learning context that I'll be talking about focuses on teaching design to young children and collaboration, promoting collaboration. But there were a lot of moments, as there is with every classroom full of children, there are moments where none of this is happening. And we explore that, those episodes of learning as what really is happening if it's not related to the learning goals that we're trying to achieve. And that's how we are going to focus on the entire learning ecology and not one singular aspect of learning. Ooh, this one, I'm just going to show you and take it away because this is the whole pragmatist perspective that we use. The different kinds of theories that we draw from design thinking is such an interdisciplinary work, and then whatever you bring into those in that concept of collaboration or technology, you've got to pull from different theories. So this flowchart just shows you how we were drawing from so many different theories to kind of build our framework, to understand the reality that's in front of us, and make sure that we were doing justice to the interdisciplinarity of this field. Moving on to the context. Oh my gosh, I love these children. My advisor always used to tell me that you're never going to forget their names, and I did not forget their pseudonyms. So this is the context in which we were conducting our research. It's an after-school club in central Pennsylvania. The club was promoted as a place where we are going to teach children design thinking, using different tools, and because my focus was in technology, we ran the club 3 times a week on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and you will see why I'm telling you Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, because that's how I code my data. The club involved 3rd to 7th grade students and they used to work in small groups of 3 to 4 students each. They work on a semester-long design project, and we try to make the design project as real and as authentic as possible. So they're not looking at problems that they can't connect with. So some things do get fictional because you can't take everything out, but the problem, the beginning problem, we try to keep it as real as possible. So for this one, for this iteration of the club, the design challenge that the students were working on was to redesign a local mall. So there was a mall that was just a few miles away from the school. They had either been to the mall, interacted with the mall in some way, seen the mall on the news, and the mall was on the verge of closing down. So their job was to look at the mall where it is right now, redesign the mall any which way you like, whatever you want, but to better meet the needs of children so that they can invite more people into their space. We use the design cycle of question, plan, create, and investigate to keep it simple for the children. They would go through these 4 cycles, and we had different activities designed for each of these stages of design. So in order to analyze the data, or rather the research design that we used an experimental, qualitative experimental design. I was really interested in comparing cases. I wanted to see the difference between if I'm using physical technology, what's happening here, if I'm using digital technology, what's happening here, what's different, what's better, what's comparable, just what is changing in my learning environment. So physical technology involved tangible objects that students could manipulate with. We often think of technology comes to our mind, but most of our screen-based technologies are really nothing but an extension of our physical technologies. So I wanted to compare what things look like against physical technology and digital technology, so screen-based technology. So those were my 2 conditions. People who have conducted experiments would trying to see where this is going. And then I had 3 time points of stage 1 was question and plan put together. Stage 2 was create, where they're actually building and prototyping this what this new mall is going to look like. And stage 3 was investigate. There were different groups and different groups that from different days that were lined up over here for each condition and each time point. For this particular presentation, we are just going to focus on stage 1 and stage 2 and what the students were working on when they were questioning, planning, and then creating the prototype. The world of data over here a little bit. So we started with data in our context looked like video recordings and audio recordings collected from the classroom environment. So let's say this was a table where students are working, 4 of them are working here together. There was a camera recording what they're doing, what they're talking about, and an audio recorder on the table. We started with 50 lessons, 12 different groups across the 3 days, and 250 hours of just data, just dump of data. On that, we just applied some exclusion criteria of 7th grade students were not then eventually included in the research because we did not have the same number of them. And because I'm thinking of conducting an experiment, I'm trying to stay true to that design, although it's qualitative, so you can't really do everything, but it was more like a pseudo experimental model. So we dropped some classes in some groups. We ended up with 25 lessons, 6 groups, still comparable, 2 from each of the days, and then 125 hours of data. Some more lesson selection criteria were applied more systematically to select comparable lessons for this particular research question. And then we came down to 3 lessons, 6 groups, and 24 hours of data, 23 hours of data. And within that 23 hours of data, the analysis looked something like a mixed method, where we started with quantitative analysis, then moved to qualitative analysis. The quantitative analysis was essentially by using quantified qualitative data. So you have all this qualitative data, you code, you number, you count, and that was mainly to kind of get a sense of your data world, data land. Understand the patterns, because 23 hours of video recorded data is too difficult to dive deep into. So you would code things, you would understand the patterns, and then you would systematically go into studying these common pieces. So we started by doing that, and then we used the 2 main categories I would want to talk about over here is productive talk and unproductive talk. For our context, productive talk was discussing anything about the redesign of the mall, the design challenge that they were engaging in, and working together because collaboration was an important piece for our research. Unproductive talk was the opposite. When they are not doing any of these 2 things, they are doing something else, something fun. But when we were looking and analyzing the data, we looked at both the data, productive talk and unproductive talk. And if you haven't gauged this yet, the unproductive talk was a lot more fun to see and analyze, because there was all those things that emerged as a part of the learning environment that we never expected or designed for. So of course we looked at both the data, so that's how we covered the ecology of learning, going back to that concept, where we looked at things that were important to our learning environment, but also looked at things that were almost like a byproduct of the learning environment. And then we went into interaction analysis by to look more deeply at episodes of data. So what we are now going to look at is the fun part where we get to see some children having fun, more fun than what we are having maybe. So here's the first set of findings. When we were looking at the productive and unproductive talk around physical and digital screen-based technology, physical technology, 76% of the interactions that the children had were productive, were coded as productive. They're talking about design, they're talking about the things we want them to talk about. Great, right? As an instructor, you're like, I got this amazing curriculum to you and you're doing everything I want you to do. Yay! Around screen-based technology, 40% of the interactions were productive, but 29.61% of the interactions were not unproductive. 5%, just 5% here in physical technology wasn't productive. Don't want to leave you with that information because there's a lot more to it. So we'll dive deeper into different episodes for the productive and unproductive pieces. So here what you see on the screen is an example of what the productive talk looked like around physical technology. Stephen and Colin are discussing what all do they want to include in their mall. They're working on a bullseye diagram where they're kind of moving sticky notes and being like, I want this in the center of the bullseye diagram. No, that's not a great idea. Let's move around. So using these very real, tangible objects to make these decisions of what's important, what's not important. On the screen-based side of things, Jovita Harper and the other 2 team members are doing the exact same activity on a screen, on a shared slide, where they all know that they're on a shared slide, on Google Slide, have the same kind of bullseye diagram. But did you just notice Jovita was like, oh my God, let me see what you're doing over there. So it was hard for them to click on a mouse and move the sticky notes and expect it to move on the other side as well. So going back to that tangibility of objects, they're still doing it, but it was much easier for them to do the same things with the physical technology. So this is what the turns in the top look like for physical technology. And I guess where I want to go with this is that physical technologies were much easy to manipulate for children and build on each other's ideas. So what was a good example of productive talk around screen-based technology? Now here the focus is not on the group but the community, because with screen-based technology, we are looking at group 1. They all are building in Minecraft at this point of time. So now they're creating a prototype of what they created in Minecraft, of what this mall needs to look like. And while we're building in Minecraft, group 1 accidentally flooded the environment, and that's what they're saying that, oh, we are flooded, we can't get the water to stop. And this problem very quickly becomes a problem of the whole community because they're building all in the same space. So group 1 is flooded right now, 5 minutes later, the entire community is going to be flooded. So you can see that the student from this group goes like, oh, where are you guys? Are you on the ground? Let me come help you. The student from here, I found you, I'll help you. None of this is happening with our interactions. They figured it out, they found a problem, and they all are invested in solving it. So what the screen technologies were able to do in this context is that they were able to give students an authentic problem to solve, to engage with each other. And collaboration just magically happened. Was this in my curriculum? No. I don't want the environment to get flooded, but it happened and they all wanted to interact with each other and solve that problem. So this open-ended environment for learning, creating these experiences and problems, was the real strength for screen-based technology. And moving on, finally, this is my favorite one. This is an example of what an unproductive talk looked like, when children were interacting with each other. This is again, we are looking at group 1 and Julie, Bailey, and Lance. They all are, so in this episode it started with, let's go look at Google Maps to figure out what the mall looks like, so then we can redesign the mall. Great, sounds productive, sounds like they're working on the design challenge and whatnot and collaborating with each other. 2 minutes later, they're like, oh, look at this, in Google Map, I can go from this point in the mall to this mountain that's next to the mall, which has got nothing to do with my design, and now we're exploring the mountain. So very quickly, that focus shifted from looking at the mountains, trying to go to Tennessee from that mountain, and everything that was not related to the project. And soon enough, because they were so engrossed by the screen, they all were like just with their screens. So you see Joey, he's in his screen, and Bailey is trying to just like go from this screen to that screen to make what Lance was doing come up on Joey's screen. So now they're in Google Maps and trying to explore Google Maps. They went from doing one thing to another, and then they learned how to and they went from street view to satellite view in Google Maps, learned how to switch between the two, learned what the two things meant. And eventually, another student from another group came in just to observe, no interaction, no collaboration, just observe what was happening on the screen, and went back to her group and taught her group members of how to navigate between satellite view and street view. You know how I learned that? Accidentally by doing something I did not want to do on my phone. So for me as an instructor, this was fascinating that I didn't even intend to teach them this, But they learn this, and what is this doing in today's Asian era? Digital fluency, learning and interacting with technologies, is a skill that we want our children to have at a young age. As much as we don't want them to be interacting with screens for a long period of time, but these are the skills that they also need to have as they grow up in an information age. So that was what unproductive talk looked like, or a short glimpse of what unproductive talk looked like. And eventually, I guess we've already spoken in terms of going into the lessons learned. I think these were the two big takeaways for me in terms of the technology. And I want to switch gears and talk a little bit more about some other aspects that came up as an instructor and a researcher in this environment for me. The first one being observe the entire ecology from a macro and micro. Many a times the micro and the macro constantly conflicted for me. Where as an instructor, I'm looking at this group where there are these three students. One of them is favoring out to another group, trying to do something. And as an instructor, I'm like, hey, you know what, this is your group. Let me help you facilitate this whole activity over here. Trying to bring back this group. And I'm walking out of the room thinking as an instructor, oh, that child needs more support. I need to do something with him to bring him back into this activity and view. And when I'm looking at that same episode as a researcher from a macro level, I realized that this child is not with his group because the norms of those groups are not very inclusive for him. As an instructor, I could not see. As an instructor, I was looking at this one child who was going off and needing my support. But as a researcher, I realized it was the other two group members who needed to learn and change some norms of behavior to make sure that this child was with them. So looking at the macro and the micro sometimes is challenging as an instructor. Not all of us are not researchers in an instructing environment, but that really opened my eyes to some of those aspects. Affordances of technologies are determined by your users, in this case, your learners. You can take best of the tools and technologies, specifically digital, into your learning environment, but if your learners find a different way to use it, it is not serving the same purpose that you took it with. So analyzing or understanding the affordance of technology before you take it into a learning environment, during the time when it's in your learning environment, and after it has been in your learning environment, is very important to really understand the affordances of technology from the perspective of the users. And that element of partnering can look very different when you're working with children, because you cannot sit down on a table with them and so tell me how this worked for you and expect them to give you good responses, but you have to do a lot of observation and engagement. And let's play a game where you're actually going to give me feedback, but it's going to be a game for you. So doing those things more creatively and just aligning the learning goals to the tools of affordances by studying the ecology and including your participants. And what I just spoke was how you include your participants if they are sub-graders. So with that, I guess these are the two discussion prompts I want to leave you with. If your designers are children, if you're working with children, what does it mean to you to engage with children as partners, as a parent, as a friend, as a mentor, and then how do you make sense of the learning that happens for you in the process when you're working with them?
I love the videos. I'm just curious, you can test it. What would happen if all of those children were in their computer screens in the living room, their phones not next to each other, so they're meeting over? Because it's really the physical aspect that a lot of them not affect in that video.
Yeah, I feel developing skills on computers needs to look different than just teaching them how to use a computer, but how to conceptually understand what is a shared space. I do this here at the university of explaining what a SharePoint is to my learners, which sometimes are staff members, faculty members, and it's not about what button to click and what to do that they need to understand, but they just need to understand what is this cloud where all this stuff is going, what happens to it in the cloud, where all these things are not visible to them. So here the issue for the student who is not that they know what button to click to make things happen, but the understanding that if I do this, is it coming up on the other person's screen as well? And if it is, how is it coming up on the other person? So I did it on my screen. screen. My screen is my screen, your screen is your screen. So I think engaging with them at a level where technology needs to be understood conceptually. It's difficult. I don't know how to do it. But I know that we need to do something like that around technology with children.
So I work with middle schoolers at the University of Richmond, and I was curious, a lot of our activities usually are like 15 to 20 minutes long, if that. For switching, we do a lot of different activities throughout the day, because that's usually when their attention span kind of cuts off. Do you find that with technology or when you're working with things in person, there's any difference in the time of like attention span, what they're working on, or is it similar?
That's a very interesting question. So with technology, especially screen-based technology, although you think that they are engaging with one activity, and your point about their attention span switching is absolutely correct. But in a technology like a screen-based technology or digital technology, they are getting those moments to switch very quickly within the same technology. So for us, it looks like a screen, or they are engaged with a screen for like what, 20 minutes, half an hour, 1 hour. But they are jumping from I am looking at this mountain and now I'm going from satellite view to the. So they are actually doing that in the technology. It's just that for us, the technology is just like on the same screen. How are you with this for 1 hour and you can't be with me for 15 minutes, right? So their brain is still doing that, but it just looks different to us.
Yeah. So when you were talking about the two conditions, like the technology versus like the physical versus the virtual, I was a little confused around like the technologies that they use, because it sounded like there was a lot of different applications they use, and I wonder what was the differences.
That's a really good question, and I can't see my. The more cognitively challenging tasks on the paper, but use the screen for gaining those open-ended experiences. So design of your instruction and facilitation, and get more out of the strengths of one technology and the other. So mixing two technologies work really well, but I cannot plug them into the conditions and compare them against the other conditions. But yes, those are the two things we try towards aiming to set.
So we had a great question from the virtual folks. They said, do you think the results could be different post-COVID? Since a lot more students started using technology way more in order from learning than before. So that came from
I cannot answer that question as a researcher because I have not conducted an experiment post-COVID to say yes or no. But intuitively, thinking through the pieces of this, what we are looking at here are the strengths and weaknesses. Oh, yay, that's up there. We're looking at the strengths and weaknesses of the tools. The place where it is going to make the difference in that second part where we were talking about the lessons learned, where now when I'm going to take a technology to my users, they are going to look at it differently because they have learned so much in the next 2 years. So I want to say, yes, things will change, but how and in what direction, I can't say because I haven't done that post-COVID. And yes, your users are going to look at your tools differently now that they have gained so much experience with this.
I'm curious, did the students who, like, did the unproductive talk influence, or was that a needed element for the like outcome of the design projects themselves? Like, just because they were on task in person more, or the physical more, did that affect the quality or like the ingenuity of the designs that they produce?
I'll answer that in two parts. One, we never evaluated the products. For us, the process was the goal, and everything that we wanted to teach them about collaboration, about 21st century skills, creative thinking, problem solving. If we start going in and evaluating their products, we would be kind of conflicting our own premise there. So we wanted to focus heavily on the process, and as instructors of these learning environment, also this was an after-school club, my biggest advantage was I can go into the curriculum, students can learn something else, walk out, no one's questioning me, no one's giving them a standardized test at the end of it. So I had like an advantage over there to let the curriculum emerge out of the process. And a lot of unproductive talk as an instructor, this was what was happening to me, like, oh my God, I can see you're not doing what I want you to do. But I will let you do what you want to do because this is the time when you have to have fun, and I don't want to come in the way of that. And this goes back to this idea of like macro and micro, where I'm standing here as an instructor. I'm like, I want to come there, interrupt you, and tell you to do this, but I don't. And when I go back as a researcher and look at those moments, they're like beautiful. They're learning something that they want to learn. They're learning something that they're invested in. I guess as an instructor, that's a win for me. It's okay if they don't, hit all the learning goals that I went in, but they really helped me to add more learning goals than what I went into. It took me a lot of time to get okay and comfortable in that environment and have faith that they're going to learn something out of this.
Having a virtual and in-person workspace, did you see any jealousy is the wrong word? Or students saying, oh, I want to pencil for my challenge, like I want to be using a computer. Did that have any impact on the dynamic of that?
That's a good question, but the environment was not designed like that. Would have totally happened, but the way I did it was a particular stage. Let's say if you're in the Tuesday club, for the first design stage, all of them were using the same tools and technology, and it was towards the end of which was a different part, and that's why it was scrapped out of this particular study, the investigation stage. By then, they had touched all the tools and technologies that we had. That stage, the students were given the autonomy to pick your own tool, do what you want. And at that point of time, none of them was like, oh, those people are using this, so I'm not getting, because they all picked their tools. And I was surprised some of them actually went in to like pick the sticky notes and the physical tools, didn't want the laptops. Some of them started with one laptop and they're like, we'll just keep one because if we have two, then we don't get things done. They were the ones saying this, not us. So it was a journey.
Any other lingering questions on Zoom or any other